The rain fell like bullets on the day Christiana Russo buried her heart. She stood at the edge of the cemetery, separated from the cluster of mourners by 20 feet and a lifetime of secrets. The black dress clung to her skin, soaked through, but she didn't move toward the shelter of the oak trees where others huddled beneath umbrellas. She deserved this cold, this punishment, this drowning while still breathing. The priest's words were lost in the downpour, but it didn't matter. Christiana knew the script: ashes to ashes, dust to mud. Her husband's casket gleamed despite the gray sky. Expensive mahogany that Marco had picked out himself 3 months ago when the doctor gave him the timeline. He'd been practical about death, the way he'd been practical about everything, except love. Love had been his one reckless investment, and look where it got him. Mrs. Russo. A hand touched her elbow. Her sister-in-law, Sophia, with her perfect makeup running in black rivers. Come under the umbrella. You'll catch pneumonia. Christiana pulled away. I'm fine. You're shaking. I said I'm fine. Her voice came out sharper than intended, and Sophia retreated with wounded eyes. Christiana would apologize later. Add it to the list of things she'd broken and couldn't fix. The cemetery sprawled across a hillside overlooking the city that had given them everything and taken it all back. Down below, life continued. Cars honked. People rushed to meetings, to lunches, to lovers. Up here, time had stopped at 10:47 a.m. on a Thursday that felt like the end of the world. She watched them lower Marco into the ground and felt nothing. That was the worst part. Not the grief she'd run out of tears 2 weeks ago, but the hollow space where grief should live. Guilt rushed in to fill the void, thick and choking. She should feel more, should feel something. Her husband of 8 years was disappearing into the earth, and all she could think about was the secret folded in her coat pocket, the letter she'd found in his desk drawer, the truth that had died with him, leaving her alone with questions that would never be answered. I'm sorry, Marco had whispered in his final hours, his hand weak in hers. For everything. You deserved better than me. She'd thought he meant the cancer, the slow, cruel way it had stolen him piece by piece until the man she married became a stranger in their bed. But the letter suggested something darker, something that made her wonder if she'd ever known him at all. The mourners began to disperse, their duty done. They filed past her with murmured condolences that sounded like white noise. Christiana stood frozen, watching the gravediggers lean on their shovels, waiting for her to leave so they could finish their work. Professional grief had a timeline, and she was running over. That's when she felt it. The absence of rain. Christiana looked up. A black umbrella hovered above her head, held by a hand in a charcoal suit. She turned. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face carved from stone and secrets. His eyes were the color of espresso, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive, cedar and smoke, and far enough that she could run if she needed to. She didn't know him, but something in his gaze said he knew her. You're getting wet, he said. His voice was low, accented with something Mediterranean she couldn't place. I know. Christiana's fingers tightened around the funeral program in her hand. Marco's face, smiling up from cheap paper. I prefer it. Grief isn't a penance. He reached behind him and produced a coat black cashmere, clearly tailored, worth more than her car payment. Before she could protest, he draped it over her shoulders. The warmth was immediate, shocking. She'd forgotten what warmth felt like. I don't need... You're shivering. He cut her off gently but firmly. And your lips are turning blue. Marco wouldn't want you to freeze at his funeral. Christiana's head snapped up. You knew my husband? Something flickered across his face, regret, maybe, or calculation. Everyone knew Marco Russo. He was a good man in a city that eats good men alive. The way he said it made her skin prickle. There was weight behind those words, history she couldn't decode. Who are you? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Someone paying respects to the dead. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give. For now. He glanced toward the grave, where the last shovelful of dirt was being patted down. You shouldn't be alone today, Mrs. Russo. I'm not alone. My family. Already left. He gestured to the empty cemetery. She turned and realized he was right. Even Sophia had disappeared, probably assuming Christiana wanted solitude. The gravediggers were walking away, their job finished. She and this stranger were the only two people remaining, standing among the dead like conspirators. Fear should have kicked in. A strange man, a deserted cemetery, her completely vulnerable, but Christiana felt something else entirely, curiosity, and beneath that, something more dangerous, recognition, as if her soul knew him, even though her mind didn't. "Why are you really here?" she asked. He studied her for a long moment, rain drumming against the umbrella above them. "Because Marco asked me to be. 3 months ago, when he knew he was dying, he made me promise to watch over you, to make sure you were safe when he was gone." Christiana's blood turned to ice. Safe from what? The stranger's jaw tightened. From the truth he died protecting you from. Before she could respond, before she could demand answers or run screaming, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, expensive, stationery. Her name written in Marco's handwriting across the front. "He wanted you to have this, but only if you asked the right questions." The stranger pressed it into her hand. His fingers were warm, scarred across the knuckles like he'd spent a lifetime fighting. "Read it when you're ready, and when you are, when you want to know everything, call this number." He produced a business card. No name, just a phone number embossed in gold. "I don't understand," Christiana's voice cracked. "What truth? What was Marco protecting me from?" The stranger's expression softened, and for a moment, she saw something almost tender in his eyes. "Your husband loved you, Mrs. Russo. Everything he did, every lie he told, every secret he kept, it was all to keep you out of a world that destroys everything beautiful it touches. But now he's gone, and that world knows you exist. Whether you want to or not, you're going to need protection." "From what?" He leaned closer, and she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "From the people who killed him." The words hung between them like a blade. Christiana's knees weakened, but his hand shot out, steadying her elbow with surprising gentleness. "Marco died of cancer," she whispered. The doctors saw what they were meant to see." His voice dropped to barely above a murmur. "But you knew, didn't you? Deep down, you knew something wasn't right. That's why you're standing in the rain instead of crying. That's why you're more angry than sad." He was right. God help her. He was right. The feeling that had haunted her through Marco's illness, the sense that something was off, that the story didn't add up. "Who are you?" Christiana asked again, but this time it wasn't a question. It was a plea. The stranger finally stepped back, removing his hand from her arm. The absence of his touch felt like abandonment. "My name is Dante Moretti, and your husband died owing my family a debt he could never repay. Now that debt falls to you." Before she could respond, before she could process the bomb he'd just detonated in her world, Dante turned and walked away. His dark figure disappeared between the tombstones, leaving her alone with his coat around her shoulders, 2 envelopes in her hands, and the terrifying certainty that her life would never be the same. Christiana looked down at Marco's grave. Fresh earth, wilting flowers, a headstone that proclaimed him loving husband and devoted friend. All lies. Or maybe not lies, maybe just incomplete truths, which were somehow worse. Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope Dante had given her. Inside, Marco's familiar scrawl. "My dearest Christiana, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and he's found you. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to know about this part of my life. But Dante was right, I can't protect you from the grave. The man who gave you this letter is dangerous, but he's also the only person who can keep you alive. Trust him. I know it sounds insane, but trust him with your life, because that's exactly what you'll need to do. I love you. I'm sorry I was never brave enough to tell you the whole truth, but maybe, if you're very lucky, you'll find a kind of honesty with him that I could never give you. Forever yours, Marco." Christiana's hands shook so violently the letter nearly fell. She read it again, and again. The words didn't change. Dante, danger, alive, trust. Thunder rumbled overhead, and the rain intensified. She stood there in a dead man's coat, holding a letter from beyond the grave, and felt the first crack in the ice that had frozen her heart. Marco hadn't died of cancer. Someone had killed him. And the Mafia boss who'd covered her with his coat knew exactly who. What would you do if you discovered everything you knew about your life was a lie? Drop a comment below. Christiana didn't go home. She couldn't face the empty apartment, the smell of sickness that still clung to the walls, the sympathy casseroles crowding her refrigerator from neighbors who thought cancer was the worst thing that could happen to a person. They didn't know. None of them knew that her entire marriage had been built on a foundation of secrets, and now that foundation was crumbling beneath her feet. Instead, she drove to the only place that had ever felt like sanctuary, her sister's coffee shop in the North End. The bell chimed as she pushed through the door, still wearing Dante's coat over her soaked funeral dress. The warmth hit her like a wall espresso, cinnamon, the yeasty smell of fresh bread. A handful of customers looked up, then quickly away when they saw her face. She must look like a ghost. Christiana? Her sister Gia appeared from behind the counter, flour dusting her dark curls. Oh my God, you're drenched. I thought you'd go straight home after the… She stopped, taking in Christiana's expression. What happened? Can we talk? Upstairs? Gia's apartment above the shop was small but warm, filled with plants and books and the kind of comfortable chaos that came from actually living rather than just existing. Christiana had always envied her sister's ability to build a life that was messy and real. Her own life with Marco had been so carefully curated, so picture-perfect. Now she understood why. He'd been hiding something in all that perfection. Sit. Gia pressed a mug of tea into Christiana's hands and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. You're scaring me. What's going on? Christiana set down the tea untouched. Her hands were steadier now, the shock crystallizing into something sharper. Determination, maybe. Or desperation. What do you know about Marco's business? Gia blinked. His business? Christiana, he's been dead for 3 hours. Can we not? Please. Christiana's voice cracked. I need to know. Did he ever talk to you about what he really did? He was an accountant, corporate finance or whatever. Gia sat down across from her, concern creasing her forehead. Why? What's this about? Christiana pulled out both letters, the one she'd found in Marco's desk and the one Dante had given her. She laid them on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Because I don't think he was just an accountant. I think he was involved in something dangerous. And I think that's what killed him. Gia read the letters in silence, her face going pale. When she finished, she looked up at Christiana with frightened eyes. Dante Moretti. Christiana, do you know who that is? He said his name was. I know what he said. Everyone in this neighborhood knows who Dante Moretti is. Gia's voice dropped to a whisper, as if saying his name too loudly might summon him. The Moretti family controls half the city. Shipping, construction, waste management, all fronts for what they really do. They're Mafia, Christiana. Old school organized crime with new school sophistication. And Dante. She swallowed hard. Dante is the head of the family. His father ran things for 30 years before he died, and Dante took over 5 years ago. They say he's even more ruthless than his father was. Christiana's stomach dropped. Marco knew him. Marco knew a Mafia boss. More than knew him, apparently. Gia tapped the letter. This says Marco owed them a debt. What kind of debt would an accountant owe to the Mafia? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications Christiana wasn't ready to face. She thought about Marco, sweet, careful Marco who'd brought her coffee in bed every Sunday, who'd cried at their wedding, who'd held her hand through his mother's funeral and never once raised his voice in 8 years of marriage. That man couldn't be involved with organized crime. Except he had been. The letters proved it. He wanted me to trust Dante, Christiana said softly. With my life? That's insane. You can't trust a man like that. Men like Dante Moretti don't protect people out of kindness, Christiana. They collect debts. And if Marco owed him something… Gia's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Now Christiana owed it instead. Christiana stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. Rain still fell, turning the cobblestones slick and dark. A black car idled at the corner, expensive, tinted windows, the kind that screamed money and danger. She'd seen that car before, at the cemetery, following her on the drive here. He's watching me, she whispered. Gia joined her at the window. Who? Dante. Or his people. Christiana pointed to the car. They've been following me since the funeral. We should call the police. Christiana almost laughed. And tell them what? That a Mafia boss gave me his coat and some letters? The police won't help me, Gia. If half of what Marco wrote is true, if I'm really in danger from whoever killed him, then going to the authorities will just paint a target on my back. So what are you going to do? Christiana turned from the window and picked up the business card Dante had given her. The number gleamed in gold, elegant and ominous. I'm going to do what Marco said. I'm going to find out the truth. By trusting a criminal? By trusting the only person who seems to know what really happened to my husband. Christiana met her sister's eyes. I've spent 8 years being the perfect wife, asking no questions, believing every word Marco told me. And now he's dead, and I'm standing here realizing I never really knew him at all. I can't live like that anymore, Gia. I can't be that person who just accepts what she's told. Gia grabbed her hands. I understand. I do. But Christiana, listen to me. Men like Dante Moretti are dangerous. They hurt people. They destroy lives. Whatever Marco was involved in, whatever debt he left behind, it's not worth dying for. I'm not going to die. Christiana squeezed her sister's hands, then let go. I'm going to survive. And to do that, I need answers. She picked up her phone and dialed the number before she could lose her nerve. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered deep, familiar, sending shivers down her spine. Mrs. Russo, I was wondering when you'd call. We need to talk, Christiana said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The truth. All of it. No more games. A pause. She could hear something in the background, classical music, maybe, or the rumble of an engine. Not over the phone. Can you meet me in an hour? Where? There's a restaurant in the seaport, Bella Notte. Tell them you're my guest. Come alone, Christiana. If you bring anyone, your sister, the police, anyone, this conversation ends before it begins. How did you know? I know where you are. I know who you're with. It's my job to know. His voice softened slightly. I'm not trying to frighten you. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. Christiana looked at Gia's terrified face and made a decision that would either save her life or end it. 1 hour. I'll be there. She hung up before he could respond, before she could change her mind. You're really going to meet him, Gia said. It wasn't a question. I am. Then I'm coming with you. No. Christiana's voice was firm. He said alone. And I'm not risking you. If something happens to me. Don't talk like that. If something happens, Christiana continued, you call this number. She wrote down a contact on a piece of paper. Detective Sarah Chen. She was at the funeral. Marco mentioned her once, said she was one of the good ones. Tell her everything. Gia took the paper with shaking hands. Christiana, please, don't do this. But Christiana was already heading for the door. Dante's coat still wrapped around her shoulders like armor. She paused at the threshold and looked back at her sister, her safe, normal sister who'd never had to question whether her life was a lie. I love you, Christiana said. No matter what happens, remember that. Then she was gone, down the stairs and out into the rain, walking toward the black car that waited at the corner like a hearse. The back door opened as she approached. She couldn't see who was inside, but she didn't need to. She already knew. Christiana slid into the car, and the door closed behind her with the finality of a cell door slamming shut. The interior was all leather and shadow, lit only by the glow of the city lights sliding past the windows. And there, across from her, sat Dante Moretti. He'd changed from his funeral suit into something more casual, still expensive, still perfectly tailored, but less formal. A black shirt open at the collar, revealing the edge of a tattoo she couldn't quite make out. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, pushed back from that striking face. In the dim light, he looked like something from a Renaissance painting, dangerous angels and fallen saints. You came, he said. You didn't give me much choice. There's always a choice, Christiana. You could have run. Could have ignored the letters, buried your head in the sand, pretended everything was fine. Most people would have. I'm not most people. A smile tugged at his lips. No, you're not. Marco knew that. It's what he loved most about you, that steel underneath all that softness. The car began to move, smooth and silent. Christiana glanced out the window, watching her sister's shop disappear behind them. Where are we going? Somewhere we can talk without being overheard. The restaurant was a test, Christiana, to see if you'd actually come, if you were brave enough to face this. You passed. And if I hadn't? His expression darkened. Then I would have had to find another way to protect you. A way you wouldn't have liked nearly as much. The threat was implicit but clear. Christiana's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. Protect me from what, exactly? You keep saying I'm in danger, but you haven't told me why. What did Marco do? What was his debt? Dante leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, bringing him closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of responsibility that sat on those broad shoulders. Your husband worked for me, Christiana. For the past 3 years, he was my accountant. He managed the books for my legitimate businesses and some of my less legitimate ventures. He was good at it. Brilliant, actually. He could make money appear and disappear like magic, keep us clean when the feds came sniffing around. Christiana's world tilted. Marco worked for the Mafia. He worked for me, Dante corrected. And he did it to save his father's life. His father? Christiana's mind raced. Marco's father had died 6 years ago, a heart attack at his retirement party. She'd been there, had held Marco while he cried, had helped plan the funeral. His father is dead. Now he is. But 6 years ago, Antonio Russo was very much alive and very much in debt to some people who don't forgive financial mistakes. He'd gambled away his pension, borrowed from loan sharks, got in over his head. They were going to kill him. Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. Marco came to me, begged me to intervene, offered himself in his father's place. Christiana felt sick. So you killed his father anyway? No. Dante's eyes flashed with something that might have been offense. I paid off Antonio's debts, every cent. And I gave him 6 more months with his son before his heart gave out naturally. In exchange, Marco agreed to work for me for 5 years, 5 years of service, and his slate would be clean. His father would be safe. And you would never have to know about any of it. But someone killed him before the 5 years were up. 3 months before, Dante confirmed. He was so close to being free. And then someone poisoned him. Made it look like cancer, slow enough that no one would question it. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. The doctors were convinced it was pancreatic cancer, aggressive and inoperable. There was nothing I could do but watch him die. Tears burned behind Christiana's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of this man. Why? Why would someone do that? Because Marco found something. Something that could destroy not just my family, but several of the major organizations in the city. Proof of money laundering, bribery, connections between legitimate businesses, and organized crime. He was putting together a ledger, documentation that could send dozens of powerful people to prison for life. Why would he do that? If he worked for you, he was protecting you. Dante's voice gentled. Marco knew that after his 5 years were up, there was no guarantee someone wouldn't come after him later. Use him for leverage, hurt him to get to me, or vice versa. He wanted insurance. Wanted to make sure that if anything happened to him, you'd have protection. So he collected information. Evidence. And he was going to give it to me in exchange for a guarantee of your safety. Christiana's head spun. So where is it? This evidence? That's the problem. Dante leaned back, shadows playing across his face. It disappeared. Marco hid it somewhere, and he died before he could tell me where. Now someone else is looking for it. Someone who wants it badly enough that they killed your husband to keep him from talking. And you think I know where it is? I think Marco left you a trail. Something only you would understand. Something hidden in plain sight. He was clever that way, brilliant at hiding things where no one would think to look. The car pulled to a stop. Christiana looked out and realized they weren't at a restaurant. They were at the docks, surrounded by shipping containers and the smell of salt water, completely isolated. Her pulse spiked. Don't be afraid, Dante said softly, reading her expression. I brought you here because it's secure. No cameras, no listening devices, just us and the truth. He opened his door and stepped out, then offered her his hand. Christiana stared at it strong, scarred, capable of both protection and violence. This was the moment. She could refuse, demand he take her home, walk away from all of this. But Marco's letter echoed in her mind. Trust him with your life. Christiana took Dante's hand and let him lead her into the darkness. The warehouse smelled of rust and forgotten things. Dante led Christiana through a maze of shipping containers, their footsteps echoing against concrete. Security lights cast long shadows that danced and twisted, turning ordinary objects into monsters. She kept her hand in his, not from trust, but from necessity. Without him, she'd be lost in this industrial labyrinth. They stopped at a door hidden between 2 containers. Dante pressed his thumb to a scanner, and it clicked open with a hydraulic hiss. Inside was something Christiana never expected: elegance. The space had been transformed into an office that wouldn't have looked out of place in a Manhattan high-rise. Persian rugs softened the concrete floor, leather furniture clustered around a mahogany desk. One wall was entirely glass, overlooking the harbor where ships moved like ghosts through the fog. The other walls held artwork, real artwork, not prints. A Caravaggio that should have been in a museum. A Monet that had probably been stolen decades ago. This is where Marco worked, Dante said, releasing her hand. The absence of his touch left her feeling strangely unmoored. This is where he spent those 3 years, keeping my books clean and my enemies blind. Christiana walked to the desk, running her fingers along its polished surface. She could picture Marco here, his reading glasses perched on his nose, his brow furrowed in concentration. How many nights had he told her he was working late at the office? How many lies had she swallowed without question? "I should hate you," she said quietly. "You turned my husband into a criminal. I gave your husband a choice. He made it." Dante poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, offered her one. She took it but didn't drink. "I won't pretend I'm a good man, Christiana. I'm not. But I keep my word, and I protect what's mine. Marco was mine. That means you're mine now, too." The possessiveness in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, it sent heat pooling in her stomach, a reaction she immediately hated herself for. Her husband had been dead for 5 hours, and here she was, responding to another man's claim on her like some kind of... "Don't look at me like that," Dante said, his voice rough. "Like what?" "Like you're ashamed of being human." He moved closer, invading her space in a way that made her breath catch. "You're allowed to feel things, Christiana. Anger, fear, attraction, they don't diminish your grief. You don't know what I'm feeling. Don't I?" His dark eyes searched her face, reading secrets she hadn't known she was keeping. "You're furious. At Marco for lying, at yourself for not seeing it, at me for confirming every horrible suspicion you've had for months, and underneath all that fury, you're terrified. Because some part of you is relieved he's gone, and that makes you feel like a monster." Christiana's hand cracked across his face before she realized she'd moved. The slap echoed through the warehouse. Dante's head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming on his cheek. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Christiana waited for retaliation, for violence, for the monster everyone said he was to finally show himself. Instead, Dante laughed. It was a dark sound, edged with something almost like approval. He touched his cheek, then looked at his fingers as if checking for blood. "There she is, the woman Marco fell in love with, the one with fire in her veins." "You have no right." "I have every right." He caught her wrist as she raised her hand again, his grip firm but not painful. "Your husband asked me to protect you, to keep you safe. But he also asked me something else, Christiana. Something I promised him the night before he died." "What?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Dante pulled an envelope from inside his jacket, another letter, this one sealed with wax. Marco's signet ring had pressed into the red wax, leaving his mark. "He asked me to make sure you lived. Really lived. Not the half-life you'd been existing in, playing the perfect wife to a man who could never be fully honest with you. He wanted you to be free." He pressed the letter into her hands. "This one, you read alone, when you're ready. It explains everything, including why he chose me to watch over you." Christiana's fingers trembled as she took it. "I don't understand." "You will." Dante stepped back, creating distance between them. "But first, we need to find that evidence. Because the people who killed Marco, they know you exist now. They know you might have access to what he hid. And they're coming for you, Christiana. Tonight." As if summoned by his words, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Dante's hand flew to his waist, pulling a gun from a holster she hadn't noticed. His entire demeanor changed from seductive danger to lethal precision in a heartbeat. "Get behind the desk," he commanded. "Now." Christiana moved on instinct, her body obeying even as her mind struggled to process what was happening. More sounds, footsteps, multiple sets, moving fast. Dante positioned himself between her and the door, his weapon raised. "How many?" she whispered. "Too many." He glanced back at her, and for a moment, she saw something raw in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or fear not for himself but for her. "Christiana, listen carefully. There's a panic room behind that bookshelf. Press the 3rd book from the left on the 2nd shelf. It opens. Lock yourself inside and don't come out until I come for you." "What about you?" "I'll handle this." A grim smile touched his lips. "It's not the first time someone's tried to kill me. Probably won't be the last." The door exploded inward. "Would you risk your life for a truth that could destroy everything you thought you knew? Let us know in the comments." 4 men poured through the shattered door like wolves scenting blood. Dante fired twice. The first man dropped instantly, clutching his shoulder. The second dove behind a shipping container. Christiana watched in frozen horror as her world transformed into a war zone, bullets sparking off metal, the acrid smell of gunpowder, Dante moving with a dancer's grace through the chaos. "The panic room," he shouted without looking back. "Go!" But Christiana's legs wouldn't move. She was rooted to the spot, watching this stranger, this criminal, this man her husband had trusted risk his life to protect her. One of the attackers flanked left, raising his weapon toward Dante's blind side. "Behind you!" The words ripped from her throat. Dante spun and fired in one fluid motion. The attacker crumpled, but the distraction cost him. Another man tackled him from the right, and they went down hard. The gun skittered across the floor, stopping 3 feet from where Christiana crouched. Time crystallized. She saw everything with perfect clarity. Dante grappling with an attacker twice his size, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. 2 more men advancing through the doorway, weapons drawn, the gun on the floor, heavy and black and impossible. Christiana had never held a weapon in her life. She grabbed it anyway. The metal was cold, heavier than she'd expected. Her hands shook so violently she could barely keep her grip. One of the advancing men saw her, laughed a sound like breaking glass. "Little widow's got teeth," he sneered, his accent thick. "Russian, maybe. Put it down before you hurt yourself, Moya Krasavica." "Stay back." Christiana's voice trembled, but she kept the gun raised. "I'll shoot." "No, you won't." He took another step forward. "You don't have it in you." He was right. Christiana had never hurt anyone, never even imagined hurting anyone. She was a kindergarten teacher, for God's sake. She read stories to 5-year-olds and helped them tie their shoes. Violence existed in some other universe, some other life. But then she thought of Marco dying slowly, poisoned, afraid. She thought of Dante bleeding on the floor, fighting to protect her. She thought of herself, standing in the rain at her husband's funeral, alone and terrified and so tired of being afraid. Something inside her shifted. Christiana pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly knocked her backwards. The bullet went wide, embedding itself in the wall 3 feet from the Russian's head. But the sound, the crack of it, the authority made him freeze. Made them all freeze. "The next one won't miss," she lied, her voice steadier now. Dante used the distraction. He grabbed his attacker's head and twisted. Christiana heard something crack, saw the man go limp. In one smooth motion, Dante rolled, snatched a knife from his boot, and hurled it across the room. It caught the Russian in the thigh, and he went down screaming. The last attacker took one look at the scene, his dead and dying companions, the blood-spattered floor, Christiana with a gun she'd proven willing to use, and ran. Silence fell like a curtain. Dante rose slowly, breathing hard, blood dripping from the cut on his forehead. He looked at Christiana as if seeing her for the first time. "You shot at him." "I missed." "You shot at him," he repeated, something like wonder in his voice. He crossed to her, gently took the gun from her shaking hands. "Christiana, you could have run, should have run. Why didn't you?" She met his eyes, those dark pools that reflected her own transformation. "Because you told me to trust you with my life?" That works both ways. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with something electric, dangerous. Dante reached up, touched her face with surprising gentleness. His thumb traced her cheekbone, leaving a small smear of blood, his or someone else's. She couldn't tell. "You're not safe with me," he said softly. "You understand that now, don't you? This is my world. Violence and blood and death. It's all I know. Then teach me." The words came from somewhere deep, some part of Christiana she hadn't known existed. "Teach me to survive it." Dante's expression darkened with something that might have been desire or might have been despair. "Christiana." Sirens wailed in the distance. He tensed, listening. "We need to move, now. Those shots will have been reported, and I can't have the police finding you here." He grabbed her hand, pulled her toward a back exit she hadn't noticed. They ran through the warehouse, past the bodies, into the cold night air. A car waited different from before, nondescript, engine running. "Get in." Christiana hesitated at the door, reality crashing back. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they won't find you. Somewhere I can keep you safe until we figure out who's behind this." He cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I need to know you're with me, Christiana, all the way, because after tonight there's no going back." She thought of her quiet life, her sister's coffee shop, her kindergarten classroom. All of it seemed impossibly distant now, a dream from someone else's life. "I'm with you," she whispered. Dante's jaw tightened. Then he kissed her hard, desperate, tasting of blood and whiskey, and something darker she couldn't name. It lasted only a heartbeat before he pulled away. his eyes haunted. "God help us both," he said. The safe house was a penthouse in the financial district, all glass and steel, suspended 40 stories above the city like a fortress in the clouds. Christiana stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn paint the skyline in shades of amber and rose. Behind her, Dante spoke in rapid Italian on his phone, his voice low and dangerous. She'd cleaned the blood from her hands, changed into clothes someone had left for her, designer pieces that fit perfectly, as if he'd known her measurements, as if he'd been planning this. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt strangely calm. The adrenaline had burned away, leaving behind a crystalline clarity. She'd shot at a man last night. She'd chosen violence over safety. And some part of her, the part Marco must have seen, the part that had been sleeping for 8 years, had enjoyed it. "That was my lieutenant," Dante said, ending the call. "The man who ran is in the wind, but we identified the others. They're not local, professional contractors from Brighton Beach, Russian mob." Christiana turned from the window. Dante had showered and changed, the cut on his forehead now covered with a butterfly bandage. In the morning light, he looked younger, more human, less like the monster everyone warned her about. Why would the Russian mob want Marco's evidence? Because it doesn't just implicate Italian families. Marco was thorough, he documented everyone. Russians, Irish, even some of the Chinese triads operating out of the harbor. That ledger is a nuclear bomb, and everyone wants to either secure it or destroy it. He moved toward her, slow and careful, as if approaching a wild animal. "Christiana, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did Marco ever give you anything unusual? A safe deposit box key? A storage unit number? Coordinates? Anything that seemed out of place?" She shook her head. "Nothing. He was careful about keeping his work separate from our home life. He never brought files back, never even talked about his clients." "Think harder. It doesn't have to be obvious. Marco was a genius at hiding things in plain sight. A book with a false cover. A painting with something hidden behind the canvas. Even a piece of jewelry with data encoded in it." Christiana's mind raced through their apartment, mentally cataloging 8 years of accumulated life. Nothing stood out. Nothing seemed... "Wait. The music box," she whispered. Dante's eyes sharpened. "What music box?" "Marco gave it to me on our first anniversary. An antique, supposedly from his grandmother. It plays Claire de Lune." She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to remember. "I always thought it was strange because Marco's grandmother died when he was a baby, and he was tone deaf. He couldn't carry a tune to save his life. Why would he give me something musical?" "Because you love music." Dante's voice was soft. "He told me once that you used to play piano, that you gave it up when you married him because your apartment was too small." The casual intimacy of the statement hit her like a fist. "How much did he tell you about me?" "Everything." Dante looked away, something like guilt crossing his features. "Christiana, there's something you need to understand. Marco and I, we weren't just employer and employee. We became friends, real friends. And in those last months, when he knew he was dying, we spent hours talking. About life, about regrets, about you. About me." Her voice came out flat. "He loved you desperately, but he also knew he'd failed you. Knew that his secrets had created a distance between you that love alone couldn't bridge." Dante met her eyes again, and the raw honesty in his gaze made her chest tighten. "He asked me to do more than protect you, Christiana. He asked me to show you the truth. All of it. Including the truth about himself that he could never admit while he was alive." "What truth?" Dante reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope, the one he'd given her at the warehouse. The one she'd shoved into her pocket during the chaos and forgotten. The wax seal was still intact, Marco's ring still pressed into the red. "Read it," Dante said. "Then decide if you still want to find that music box." Christiana's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside, Marco's handwriting shakier than before, written during those final days when pain had stolen his coordination. "My darling Christiana, if you're reading this, then Dante has told you the truth about my work, about the debt, the 5 years, the evidence I collected. But there's one truth he doesn't know, one truth I could never speak aloud while I was alive. I didn't just work for Dante, I fell in love with him." The words blurred. Christiana read them again, certain she'd misunderstood. But no, there they were, impossible and undeniable. "Not in the way I loved you, never in the way I loved you. You were my wife, my heart, my reason for living. But Dante, he understood parts of me that I could never show you. The darkness, the violence I'd grown up with, and tried so hard to escape. He made me feel less alone in my secrets. Nothing physical ever happened between us. I need you to know that. But the emotional betrayal. God, Christiana, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't love you the way you deserved. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't enough, when the truth was that I was the one who wasn't whole. I'm asking you to trust Dante not just because he can protect you, but because he understands what it means to love someone you can never truly have. He'll keep you safe. And maybe, if you're very lucky, you'll find with him the honesty I could never give you. The music box holds everything, the evidence, the account numbers, the proof you'll need to stay alive. But it also holds one more truth. A truth about Dante that even he doesn't know I discovered. When you find it, you'll understand why I chose him, why I trusted him with the most precious thing in my world. You. I love you. I'm sorry. And I hope someday you can forgive me. Marco. Christiana's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, the letter falling from her hands. Her husband had been in love with someone else. With Dante. With the man standing before her, his face carefully blank, waiting for her reaction. Did you know? Her voice was hoarse. That he had feelings for me? Dante's jaw clenched. I suspected, but I never. Christiana, I never encouraged it, never acted on it. Marco was married. You were sacred to him, even when his feelings got complicated. Complicated. A laugh bubbled up, edged with hysteria. My husband was in love with a mafia boss, and you call it complicated? Your husband was a good man trying to navigate an impossible situation. Dante crossed to her, knelt down so they were eye level. He loved you, Christiana. That was never a lie. But he also carried shame about his past, about the violence he'd witnessed growing up, about the things he'd done to save his father. I represented that darkness he'd tried to bury. Being close to me, working for me, it forced him to confront parts of himself he'd spent years running from. And you? Christiana searched his face. Did you feel the same way? Something flickered in Dante's eyes, pain, longing, regret. I respected him, cared for him, but my feelings. He looked away. My feelings aren't relevant. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. He stood, putting distance between them again. We need to get that music box. Where is it? Christiana's mind was spinning, but she forced herself to focus. Marco's secrets, Dante's evasions, her own tangled emotions, all of it would have to wait. Right now, survival took precedence over understanding. It's at my apartment, on the dresser in our bedroom. Then we go tonight. After dark, when there's less chance of being spotted. Dante checked his watch. That gives us 12 hours. You should rest. You've been through hell. I can't rest. I can't just... Christiana's voice cracked. My husband died loving someone else. That changes everything. Does it? Dante turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Or does it just confirm what you already knew? That your marriage wasn't what it appeared to be? That both of you were living half-lives, pretending to be happy while pieces of yourselves slowly died? The truth of it hit like a blade. Christiana thought about the last few years with Marco, the growing distance, the polite conversations, the mechanical intimacy. She'd blamed his work, blamed stress, blamed anything except the obvious. They'd been two people who loved each other but couldn't quite reach one another across the gulf of his secrets. He wanted me to find happiness with you, she said quietly. In his letter, he practically gave me permission to... To what? Dante's voice was rough. To fall for the man he couldn't have? To complete some twisted romantic triangle from beyond the grave? He shook his head. Christiana, whatever Marco wanted, whatever he imagined might happen between us, it can't. I'm not a good man. I'm not someone you build a life with. I'm someone who keeps you alive long enough to escape back to your real world. What if I don't want to escape? The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Dante's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Christiana saw hunger there, raw and desperate, and quickly shuddered. You will, he said finally. When this is over, when you're safe, you'll remember who you really are. A kindergarten teacher who reads stories to children. Not someone who shoots at Russian mobsters in the middle of the night. But as Christiana watched him walk away, disappearing into another room to make more calls and plan their next move, she wondered if he was wrong. Maybe the woman who'd shot at that Russian, who'd chosen violence over safety, who'd felt her pulse quicken when Dante kissed her, maybe that was who she'd always been, buried beneath 8 years of playing it safe. Marco had seen it. That's why he'd chosen Dante to protect her. Not despite the danger, but because of it. Because maybe, just maybe, Christiana Russo had never needed protection from the darkness. Maybe she'd needed permission to embrace it. She picked up Marco's letter again, focusing on the last paragraph. The music box holds one more truth. A truth about Dante that even he doesn't know I discovered. What secret had Marco uncovered? What truth about Dante could possibly matter more than everything else she'd learned? Tonight, when they retrieved the music box, she'd find out. And something told her that truth would change everything. They never made it to the apartment. At 9 p.m., Dante's phone rang. He listened in silence, his expression darkening with each passing second. When he hung up, the look he gave Christiana made her blood run cold. "They have your sister." The world tilted. What? Gia was closing the shop. 3 men grabbed her off the street, threw her in a van. My people tried to intervene, but he stopped, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "I'm sorry, Christiana. I had someone watching her, but they were faster." Christiana couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Gia, sweet, innocent Gia who'd never hurt anyone, who made the best tiramisu in the city and cried at romantic comedies. Where did they take her? I don't know yet, but they left a message. Dante's phone chimed. He turned the screen toward her. The photo showed Gia bound to a chair, tape across her mouth, terror in her eyes. Beneath it, a text. "The music box for the sister. Pier 17. Midnight. Come alone or she dies." "It's a trap," Dante said. "They'll kill you both the moment they have what they want." "I don't care." Christiana was already moving toward the door. "She's my sister. I have to." Dante caught her arm. "And do what? Walk into an ambush? Get yourself killed? That doesn't save Gia." "Then what do you suggest?" Christiana whirled on him, fury and terror warring in her chest. "Let them murder her while we stand here doing nothing. We get the music box first. Then we negotiate from a position of power." "There's no time," they said midnight. "That's 3 hours away, and my apartment is on the other side of the city, by the time we get there and back." Which is exactly what they're counting on. Dante's voice was maddeningly calm. "They want you panicked, making mistakes. The moment you show up without leverage, Gia is dead, and so are you." Christiana jerked free of his grip. "You don't understand. She's all I have left. My parents are gone, Marco's gone, she's it. I can't lose her." "You won't." Dante grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Christiana, listen to me. I have people already searching for where they're holding her. We have 3 hours. That's enough time to get the music box and set up a counter-operation. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She wanted to scream, wanted to run into the night and tear the city apart until she found her sister. But Dante was right, emotion would get them both killed. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, what do we do?" "We go to your apartment, fast and quiet. Get the music box, get out." He released her, already moving toward the door. "And Christiana? When we get there, no matter what we find, we don't stop. We grab what we need and we leave. Understood?" The way he said it sent ice down her spine. "What do you think we're going to find?" Dante didn't answer. He just handed her a gun smaller than the one from last night, easier to conceal, and headed for the elevator. Christiana followed, her heart hammering. Gia's terrified face burned in her mind. 3 hours. They had 3 hours to save her sister's life. She just prayed it would be enough. The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes that felt like 20 years. Dante drove in silence, his jaw set, checking the mirrors constantly. When they pulled up to her building, he killed the lights and studied the street. "Second floor, right side?" he asked. "Yes. How did you—" "I know everything about you, remember?" He touched her face briefly, a gesture that might have been comfort or goodbye. "Stay behind me. If I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back." They moved through the building like shadows. Christiana's keys shook in her hand as she unlocked her door. The apartment was dark, silent, exactly as she'd left it after the funeral. Except it wasn't. Someone had been here. The destruction was surgical. Every drawer pulled open, cushions sliced apart, books scattered across the floor, but nothing smashed, nothing chaotic. Professional work, someone looking for something specific. "They've already been here," Christiana whispered. Dante moved through the apartment, gun raised, checking corners. "Stay close." Christiana's legs trembled as they navigated the wreckage of her life. Photos of her and Marco lay scattered like autumn leaves. Their wedding album, torn apart. The couch where they'd watched movies, gutted. 8 years of memories, violated and discarded. They reached the bedroom. The dresser stood against the far wall, drawers hanging open like broken jaws. And on top, untouched, sat the music box. It was beautiful mahogany inlaid with mother of pearl, delicate and ancient. Christiana approached it slowly, half expecting it to disappear like a mirage. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Claire de Lune began to play, tinny and sweet. "Is there a false bottom?" Dante asked, moving beside her. Christiana felt along the interior, found a small catch. The bottom panel lifted, revealing a USB drive and a folded piece of paper. She handed the drive to Dante and unfolded the paper. It was a birth certificate, old, yellowed, dated 32 years ago. The mother's name had been redacted, but the father's name was crystal clear, Antonio Moretti, and the child's name, Dante Alessandro Moretti. Except beneath Dante's name, written in Marco's handwriting, also known as Daniel Russo, Antonio Russo's biological son. Christiana's world stopped spinning. She looked at Dante, who was staring at the birth certificate with an expression of absolute devastation. "What is this?" His voice was barely audible. "Marco's final truth." Christiana's hands shook. "You're not just connected to my husband through debt and business. You're his brother. Half-brother." "That's impossible." But Dante's face had gone white. "My father was Antonio Moretti. He raised me, trained me. Antonio Moretti adopted you," Christiana read from the document. "Your biological father was Antonio Russo, Marco's father. He had an affair 32 years ago with a woman named Isabella Moretti. When she died in childbirth, her husband Antonio Moretti took you in as his own. No one knew except Marco." Dante sank onto the bed, the birth certificate clutched in his fist. "That's why he came to me. Not just to save his father's life. To save our father." The revelation crashed through Christiana like a tidal wave. Marco had worked for his own brother, had fallen in love with his own brother. The tragedy of it, the impossible tangle of loyalty and love and secrets. "He knew," Dante whispered. "All those years, he knew we were blood, and he never said anything. Why?" "Because both your fathers wanted it that way." Christiana sat beside him, her anger dissolving into something that felt like grief. "Antonio Russo was protecting you. If anyone knew Dante Moretti was his biological son, you'd have been a target, used as leverage against both families. And Marco kept the secret, even when it destroyed him." Dante's voice cracked. "He worked for me, loved me, knowing I was his brother and could never know the truth." "God, Christiana, what did I do to him?" "You gave him purpose. You gave him a way to protect his family, both sides of it." She took his hand, squeezed hard. "Dante, we don't have time to process this. Gia." His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Change of plans. Warehouse District. Pier 22. 1 hour. Just the widow. Or the sister dies screaming." They moved the location. Dante stood, his training overriding his shock. "They know we found something. They're trying to keep us off balance." "Then we go. Now." Christiana grabbed the USB drive, tucked it into her jacket. "Whatever's on this, it's worth killing for. That makes it worth trading for Gia's life." "Christiana, if we give them that drive." "I don't care about the drive. I don't care about evidence or families or debts. I care about my sister." She met his eyes, unflinching. "We trade. We get Gia back. Then we figure out the rest." Dante stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, something like pride flickering across his face. "Okay, but we do this my way. I have people positioned around the city. We won't be going in alone." "They said just me." "They said a lot of things. Doesn't mean we have to listen." He pulled her close, his forehead touching hers. "We're going to save your sister. I promise you that. But Christiana, after tonight, everything changes. You understand that, right? There's no going back to your old life." "I know." And she did. The woman who'd buried her husband this morning was gone. In her place stood someone harder. Someone who'd shot at a man, who'd uncovered impossible truths, who'd chosen to walk into danger rather than hide from it. Someone Marco had always known she could be. "Then let's go get your sister," Dante said. Pier 22 was a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and broken dreams. Christiana stood at the entrance, the USB drive burning like a coal in her pocket. Dante had positioned his people in the shadows, snipers on the rooftops, men hidden between containers, but she'd never felt more alone. The wind off the harbor cut through her coat, carrying the smell of salt and diesel and something darker. Fear, maybe, or death. "Mrs. Russo," A voice echoed from the darkness. So good of you to join us. A figure emerged from between two containers. Male, 60-something, expensive suit hidden beneath a practical overcoat. His face was hard, lined with the kind of violence that came from decades of getting away with it. Behind him, 3 armed men dragged Gia forward. Her sister was alive but barely. Blood matted her hair, her clothes were torn, and the terror in her eyes made Christiana's heart shatter. But she was breathing. She was alive. "Let her go," Christiana called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have what you want." "Do you?" The man smiled, cold and calculating. "The USB drive with Marco Russo's precious evidence? The information that could destroy half the criminal enterprises on the eastern seaboard?" He took a step closer. "I am Mikhail Volkov, and I've been looking for that drive for a very long time." "Then take it. Just let my sister go." "Oh, we will, after we verify its contents, and after we tie up a few loose ends." Volkov's smile widened. "You, for instance. And the Moretti bastard hiding in the shadows thinking I don't know he's there." Christiana's blood froze. "I came alone. Please. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I know Dante Moretti would never let you walk into a trap unprotected. Just like I know he's been fucking his dead employee's widow for what, 3 days now? Grief makes people do stupid things." Rage flared hot in Christiana's chest. "You don't know anything about." "I know Marco Russo was a sentimental fool who fell in love with the wrong person. I know he compiled evidence that could send me to prison for life. And I know that the moment I have that drive, you and your sister become liabilities I can't afford." Volkov pulled out a gun, pressed it to Gia's temple. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over the drive. Then you're going to watch me kill your sister. And then, if you're very lucky, I'll make your death quick." "Like you made Marco's quick?" Christiana's voice was ice, poisoning him slowly, making him suffer for months while his wife watched him die. "He should have given me the drive when I asked nicely." Volkov shrugged. Instead, he got self-righteous, thought he could use the information as leverage, protect his precious family. Look how that worked out. Something in Christiana snapped. The fear, the grief, the rage of the past 24 hours crystallized into perfect, cold clarity. She thought of Marco's letters, of Dante's promise, of the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "Grief does make people do stupid things." She pulled out the USB drive and threw it into the harbor. The splash echoed like a gunshot. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Volkov's face contorted with fury. "You stupid bitch. That was worth millions." "That was a fake." Christiana smiled, feeling power surge through her veins. "You think I'd bring the real drive to a hostage exchange? Marco taught me better than that. It was a bluff. The drive she'd thrown was real. But Volkov didn't know that, couldn't know that, and the uncertainty in his eyes was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Kill them both," he snarled. Everything happened at once. Dante's snipers opened fire. 2 of Volkov's men dropped instantly. The third released Gia, reaching for his weapon. Christiana ran forward, tackling her sister to the ground as bullets sparked off metal around them. Gia screamed, clutching Christiana with desperate strength. "Stay down!" Christiana covered her sister's body with her own, feeling debris rain down around them. Dante materialized from the shadows like an avenging angel. He moved through Volkov's remaining men with brutal efficiency, a shot to the leg, a knife to the shoulder, movements so fast they blurred. Within seconds, only Volkov remained, backing toward the edge of the pier with his gun raised. "It's over, Mikhail," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "Your men are dead or dying. You're surrounded. Put down the weapon." "Over?" Volkov laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think this ends with me? I'm just one head of the Hydra, Moretti. There are a dozen more who want that evidence, who'll come for her," he gestured at Christiana with his gun, "until she's dead, or they have what they want. Then they'll have to go through me. You? You're barely holding your own territory together. The other families are circling like sharks, waiting for you to show weakness. And this," Volkov gestured at Christiana again, "this is weakness. Love makes you vulnerable, Dante. Your father knew that. That's why he never—" "My father was a liar." Dante's voice cut like a blade. "He lied about my birth, about my blood, about everything that mattered. But you know what? He was right about one thing. Family is everything. And Christiana Russo is my family now, which means anyone who touches her dies." He fired. The bullet caught Volkov in the chest, dead center. The Russian staggered backward, surprise and pain warring on his face. He teetered on the edge of the pier for a moment, long enough for Christiana to see the life leave his eyes, then toppled into the black water below. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of waves lapping against concrete. Dante lowered his weapon and turned to Christiana. She was still on the ground, still covering Gia, both of them shaking with adrenaline and terror and relief. He crossed to them, knelt down, gently helped them both to their feet. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe now." Gia sobbed against Christiana's shoulder, clinging to her like a lifeline. Christiana held her sister tight, feeling the warmth of her, the realness of her, the impossible miracle of her survival. But her eyes never left Dante's face. "The drive," she said. "The real one. It's still in the music box, hidden in a second compartment. I grabbed a blank one before we left." Dante's eyes widened. "You planned this, the bluff. Marco taught me to always have a backup plan, and you taught me that sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming." She smiled, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip. "I'm a fast learner." Something that might have been pride or love or terror flickered across Dante's face. He reached out, cupped her cheek with his bloody hand. "Christiana Russo, you're going to be the death of me. Or the making of you." She turned her face into his palm, kissed the center of his scarred knuckles. "We're not done yet. Volkov was right, there are others who want that evidence. We need to figure out what to do with it. We will, together." Dante's thumb traced her cheekbone. "But first, let's get your sister to a hospital, then we can plan the rest." His men emerged from the shadows, securing the scene, removing bodies. The organized efficiency of it should have horrified Christiana. Instead, she felt a strange sense of belonging. This was Dante's world, brutal and violent and honest in its darkness. And somehow, impossibly, it felt more real than anything she'd experienced in her 8 years of pretending. Gia pulled back, looking between Christiana and Dante with red-rimmed eyes. "What the hell is happening? Who are you people?" Christiana met her sister's gaze and saw the moment Gia understood, saw the recognition of how much Christiana had changed in just 24 hours. The widow who'd stood alone in the rain was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone forged in fire and blood. "I'm someone who's done hiding," Christiana said quietly. "And he's the man who's going to help me make sure Marco didn't die for nothing." She looked at Dante, saw the question in his eyes. The offer of escape, one last chance to walk away from this life and return to safety, to teaching kindergarten and reading stories and pretending the darkness didn't exist. Christiana took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Let's go home," she said. And Dante smiled a real smile, warm and genuine and full of something that looked dangerously like hope. As they walked away from the pier, leaving death and secrets behind them, Christiana felt something shift in her chest. The guilt that had haunted her since Marco's death was still there, but it was lighter now, because she finally understood. Marco hadn't just left her evidence and protection. He'd left her permission to live fully, to love honestly, to embrace every part of herself she'd spent years suppressing. He'd set her free. And freedom, Christiana was learning, tasted like blood and smoke and new beginnings. 3 months later, Christiana stood in front of a new classroom. Not kindergarten this time. This was different, a community center in the North End, filled with women who'd survived the kind of violence most people only saw in movies. Women who'd lost husbands to gang wars, who'd been threatened by loan sharks, who'd watched their children grow up in the shadow of organized crime. Women who needed to learn how to protect themselves. "Self-defense isn't just about physical techniques," Christiana said, walking between the rows of chairs. "It's about understanding your worth, about refusing to be a victim, about recognizing that survival is an active choice, not a passive hope." The women watched her with a mixture of skepticism and hunger. She knew that look. She'd worn it herself once, standing in the rain at Marco's funeral, wondering if she'd ever feel whole again. "My husband died 3 months ago," Christiana continued, her voice steady. "I thought I knew him, thought I knew myself. But his death taught me that we're all capable of more than we imagine, more strength, more courage, more transformation than we ever dreamed possible." She caught sight of Dante leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, watching her with those dark eyes that still made her breath catch. He came to every class, silent and protective, making sure no one threatened the sanctuary she was building. After the pier, after Gia recovered, after they'd decided what to do with Marco's evidence, everything had changed. They'd made copies, dozens of them, distributed to lawyers and journalists and federal prosecutors who couldn't be bought. The information was out there now, a sword hanging over every corrupt organization in the city. Anyone who came after Christiana or Dante would trigger a cascade of prosecutions that would destroy them all. Mutually assured destruction, the only kind of peace their world understood. Next week, we'll start with basic striking techniques, Christiana said, wrapping up the class. But for tonight, I want you to go home and think about one thing. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Write it down. Bring it next week. Because facing our fears starts with naming them. The women filed out slowly, some stopping to thank her, others too shy or scarred to speak. Christiana watched them go, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. Purpose. Real purpose. Built on truth instead of secrets. When the last student left, Dante pushed off the wall and crossed to her. You're good at this. Teaching women to fight? Or teaching them to stop being afraid? Both. He pulled her close, his hands settling on her waist with the easy familiarity of habit. Marco would be proud. The mention of her husband's name no longer hurt the way it once did. Christiana had made peace with Marco's memory, with his secrets, his impossible love, his final gift. She'd scattered his ashes in the harbor where he'd grown up, whispering forgiveness to the wind. He'd been a flawed man who'd loved imperfectly, but truly, and that was enough. I got a call from Detective Chen today, Christiana said, resting her hands on Dante's chest. The task force made 15 arrests based on Marco's evidence. More coming next month. Good. Dante's jaw tightened. Every corrupt bastard he documented deserves what's coming. Including you? It was a question she'd asked before, in the early days when she was still figuring out where the lines were, what she could accept and what she couldn't. Dante had never lied to her. He ran illegal businesses alongside legitimate ones. He hurt people who threatened his family. He lived in shades of gray that most people never had to navigate. But he'd also built schools in poor neighborhoods, funded shelters for abused women, and protected families like hers from predators like Volkov. He was neither monster nor saint. He was human, complicated and real in a way Marco had never been able to be. Including me, Dante said quietly. But Marco made sure my documentation was minimal. Financial crimes mostly. Things that can be explained away or plea bargained. He protected me even while building his insurance policy. Because you were his brother. Because I was his brother. Dante's expression softened. I visited Antonio's grave yesterday. Our father's grave. Put flowers there for the first time in 6 years. Felt like a stranger, talking to a man I never really knew. Christiana reached up, touched his face. You knew him through Marco. That's enough. Is it? His dark eyes searched hers. Sometimes I wonder if Marco set this up deliberately. Threw us together knowing that after he was gone, we'd fall in love? Christiana finished. Maybe he did. Or maybe he just knew that two people carrying impossible secrets might understand each other in a way no one else could. Is that what we are? In love? It was the first time either of them had said the words aloud. They'd been dancing around it for months, the way Dante held her at night, the way Christiana smiled when he walked into a room, the slow building of something that felt like forever. But naming it made it real, made it vulnerable. Christiana thought about Marco's final letter. Maybe you'll find with him the honesty I could never give you. Yes, she said simply. I love you. Not because Marco wanted me to, not because you saved my life, but because you see me, all of me, even the parts that scare me, and you don't flinch. Dante's breath caught. For a moment, he looked young, almost vulnerable. Then he kissed her deep and slow and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. I love you too. God help me. I've loved you since that day in the rain when you stood at Marco's grave looking like you were ready to fight the whole world. He pressed his forehead to hers. I tried not to. Tried to keep my distance. Be professional. But Christiana, you're impossible to resist? She smiled. I know. You're not so easy to walk away from either. The community center was quiet around them, the early evening light painting everything gold. Through the windows, Christiana could see the neighborhood, Marco's neighborhood, Dante's neighborhood, her neighborhood now. The North End, with its narrow streets and old families and secrets buried in every brick. She'd never imagined this life. Never dreamed she'd be teaching self-defense to mob wives, sleeping beside a mafia boss, building something real from the ashes of her husband's death. But here she was, alive, free, more herself than she'd ever been. Gia called, Christiana said. She wants us to come to dinner Sunday. Says she's making Marco's favorite ossobuco. She's forgiven me for dragging her into this mess? She's forgiven you for saving her life and giving her sister something to live for. Christiana smiled, though she still thinks you're dangerous. I am dangerous. I know. That's why I love you. She kissed him again, soft and sweet. Come on, let's go home. Home was the penthouse where they'd spent that first terrifying night. Dante had offered to buy her a house, something normal, but Christiana liked the height. Liked being suspended above the city, able to see everything spread out below. It felt honest somehow, a constant reminder that she'd chosen this life with eyes wide open. They cooked dinner together, pasta, carbonara, and a salad. Nothing fancy. Dante told her about a shipping contract he'd negotiated. Christiana told him about a student who'd landed her first punch on the heavy bag. Normal couple things, except that his contracts sometimes involved smuggling and her students were often running from violent men. After dinner, they stood on the balcony watching the city lights flicker to life. Christiana leaned against Dante's chest, his arms wrapped around her, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Do you ever regret it? Dante asked quietly. Staying with me instead of going back to your old life? Christiana thought about the woman she'd been, the kindergarten teacher with her tidy apartment and her perfect marriage and her carefully maintained ignorance. That woman had been slowly suffocating under the weight of unanswered questions and unacknowledged truths. Never, she said. Marco's death gave me something he couldn't give me in life. The truth. And the truth, terrible as it is, set me free. He loved you enough to let you go. And you love me enough to let me choose. Christiana turned in his arms, looking up at that beautiful, dangerous face. That's the difference. Marco protected me from the darkness. You taught me to walk through it with my head held high. Dante cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle despite the violence those hands were capable of. You taught yourself, Tesoro. I just gave you permission to be who you always were. Then we're even. She smiled. Because you gave me a reason to live when I thought grief would kill me. They kissed as the sun set over the city, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other's arms. It wasn't the love story Christiana had imagined when she married Marco all those years ago. It was messier, darker, more complicated, but it was real. And after a lifetime of pretty lies, real was all Christiana wanted. Later, as they lay in bed with the city humming below them, Christiana traced the tattoo on Dante's chest, a phoenix rising from flames, inked over his heart. Marco knew, she said softly. When he asked you to protect me, he knew what would happen. He knew we'd fall in love. How could he know that? Because he loved us both, and he understood that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. She pressed her lips to the phoenix, feeling Dante's heartbeat steady and strong beneath her mouth. He gave me to you, and he gave you permission to love someone without fear. That was his final gift to both of us. Dante's arms tightened around her. I still talk to him sometimes. Tell him about you, about us. Think he's listening? I hope so. Christiana closed her eyes, sending a silent thank you to the man who'd loved her imperfectly but enough. Enough to set her free. Enough to trust his brother, his secret, impossible brother with her heart. I hope he knows we're happy, that we're building something beautiful from the ruins he left behind. We are, aren't we? Dante's voice held wonder. Building something beautiful. We are. Christiana fell asleep wrapped in Dante's arms, dreaming of the future instead of mourning the past. In her dreams, Marco stood in the rain at his own funeral, watching her walk away with Dante. He was smiling, peaceful, free. And when she whispered, "Thank you," he whispered back, "Live, Christiana, for both of us." She woke with tears on her cheeks and sunshine streaming through the windows. Dante was already up, making coffee in the kitchen, humming tunelessly. She watched him from the doorway, this dangerous, beautiful man who'd become her home, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. For Marco, who'd loved her enough to let her go. For Dante, who'd caught her when she fell. For herself, who'd been brave enough to choose transformation over safety. The widow who'd stood alone in the rain was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger. A woman who'd faced the darkness and claimed it as her own. A woman who'd learned that love wasn't always gentle, but it was always worth fighting for. Christiana Russo had buried her husband and her old life. But from those ashes, she'd risen fierce and free and finally, impossibly, whole. What would you risk for a second chance at real love and honest living? Share your thoughts below and let's talk about transformation, truth, and the courage it takes to embrace who we're really meant to be. Thank you for experiencing Christiana's journey from grief to empowerment, from secrets to truth, from widow to warrior. Her story reminds us that sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new. They're about finding ourselves in the wreckage of our old lives and having the courage to rebuild. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or made you think differently about love, loss, and transformation, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories that explore the complex, beautiful, messy reality of being human. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and capable of more transformation than you ever imagined. All you have to do is take that first step into the rain.